Congressman, your mic is off.
Okay, we good now?
We are
Yeah.
good.
Good
sir.
morning. How you doing, Eric?
Good.
Having a fun day already, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Greetings from Atlanta. Your friends from SAS say hello.
Oh, what a great organization.
It is privileged to work for them.
It really is. I met Dr. Goodnight, let's see, about 2003. And I was in the state Senate and working on Medicaid fraud.
Right up our alley. Yep.
Pardon?
Right up our alley.
Yes,
Our
sir.
sweet spot.
I fought that battle hard. It's amazing how difficult it is to alter the status quo.
Oh, sure.
And, there's alliances and there's vested interests and all kind of stuff, but we finally broke through. And it was my first battle that I took on as a member of the state Senate and as somebody in public office. So,
And as far as I'm aware, it's been an extremely successful project, ongoing. And
oh my goodness.
I live in Georgia, and I wish, my state would follow suit, because I've seen the results. And, the controls we put in place in North Carolina have been extraordinarily effective, saved the state, millions and millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably a B in front of that number now.
I was
Yeah.
doing a restructure of our government and looking at cost efficiencies. We were the highest tax state, corporate and personal taxes of any state in the Southeast. And I had all kind of graphs that showed all this, but to look for cost savings and efficiencies. And of course, Medicaid fraud was high on the list. And we had a lot of other waste in our government, but it was mostly waste, fraud, abuse that I went after. And ultimately we succeeded. And now, frankly, we're one of the lowest tax corporate and marginal rates in the Southeast, and we've got a strong economy.
Congratulations. Looks like I need to move to North Carolina.
well,
Yeah.
well, there's challenges.
My next
everywhere.
life. Yeah.
There's challenges everywhere today.
Yeah, there are.
Nobody has escaped the
But
problems.
thank you for hosting these gatherings. I've listened in virtually to a couple of them, and they're interesting, especially from we all have our narrow sliver of knowledge. So I'm learning about things that I heretofore haven't been exposed to.
Well, some remarkable people. One of them just checked in with us right now, John Walsh. I see his glorious picture, but I don't see him.
Well, I've got to put my tie on.
You're forgiven. You're in good company with that one.
Yeah, John is in hiding.
Hello, Eric. How are you?
Good, sir.
John's on my board and properly instructs me every day.
But does he listen and heed? Yeah.
No.
Oh,
Why
that's
do I
to you.
listen?
Yeah.
I'm the one who needs to be listening. I hope so. If I'm smart, I will be.
Well, I think we're doing pretty good. I was thinking about this mission overall last night, and it's just wonderful that we're able to do this. It's
Well,
really
it's
to be
really-
part of it. I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of years, and we're not going home with wheelbarrows of money, but we're making the world a better place.
Yes, sir.
I really believe that.
Oh, I definitely believe it. I think we've seen a lot of outcomes evidenced by what's happened in the world. And look who's come on, John Cassara. You with us, John?
Hi,
Good
Congressman.
morning.
How are you?
Well, good. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I've got something with me today.
Did you get a chance to read it?
But yeah, I've read most of it.
And John, show and tell. This may look familiar.
Oh, thanks so much.
How about it? You can sign it for me virtually.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll have a sign-in party for you, autograph party,
I was
Okay.
telling
a
Congressman-
virtual autograph party.
Hey,
Congressman,
John, do you want a copy of my comic book that I wrote?
Absolutely. I'll take it.
Oh,
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see
so
well,
John
I tell you,
My colleagues at SAS told me I need to be on my best behavior because you're on the line.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, if you are, you'll be the only one.
The only one.
We've had a great time over the last few years. We've had these forums, all over the world, and I've got probably 7 or 8 of them who have issued invitations for next year, and we're trying to have one in Panama this November that will co-host with Crime Stoppers, Alejo Campos, and very critical place, obviously, because of the colon-free trade zone down there in the canal. And then we hope if we can have one in Washington, we'll do that. But we've got many offerings in the mix that we can do next year, assuming everything clears up. But a lot of great folks: Israel, Egypt, Qatar, Budapest, London, many places. Well, here's our full program today. Hope the order is acceptable for everyone. I didn't have any real order to it, frankly. We just let the chips fall.
Just like speaking in front of John, because he's such a good speaker, I never want to follow him. So this is good with me.
Well,
Way too generous.
I heard Anna Salinda last week on a webinar with Alejo Campos, and she's very, very good. I thought she'd be a very good wrap-up. And Emmanuel, he will poke anybody well, so I'm sure he'll keep them all stirred up there. And Eric, do you have slides or anything you're going to be showing?
I do. Lucas has them. He's going to power through them on my behalf.
Lucas knows what to do. Very bright young man. I met Lucas in Paraguay, probably, 4 or 5 years ago. I was down there on a Codel. They had their brightest students in the country come to meet with some members of Congress, and he gave a presentation, and we began a dialogue ever since, and he has since working with us full time, and works out of Asunción, Paraguay. It's amazing how technology allows so many great things to happen. But he's an exceptionally capable young man, speaks very fluent English.
And
Better
makes
than mine.
makes it frictionless for all of us.
I'm just going to step away for one moment, sir. I'll be right back.
We will be missed. Bill Cassidy, his presentation will be by video. And it's just too unpredictable in the Senate in terms of scheduling. And so we found that we had some misfires earlier, and we found that doing the videos was the best way to do it, to ensure that we got their message in. So Bill has done a lot of work on trade-based money laundering and written several papers on it, and is very much engaged in this issue. So he was eager to be involved in this webinar. So John, tell me where you're headed next.
My headed next, probably back and forth between here and Northern Virginia, seeing my kids and grandkids.
Isn't that the truth?
No real travel plans right now because of the COVID stuff. That's unfortunate, because I really missed the training and the mentoring and all that stuff.
Well, you're magnificent at it, and I hope we all can continue. Ms. Solano, you there? Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Where are you today? We need your audio. Can you turn your audio on? You're still muted. See if we can get everybody hooked up. You there? Can you speak and see if we can hear you?
Hello,
There you are. All right.
how are you?
Annalena Solano, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me and seeing you again. Hi, John, how are you?
I am Linda. How are you? Good to see
Great.
you.
Good to see you too.
So we've got everyone here but Emmanuel and Johan Selly. Johan Selly, frankly, Andreas Schwartz was going to participate with us, but they decided that Mr. Selly, whom I know both of them extremely well, they're both very, very good friends, have been for 6 or 7 years involved with us. His English is a good bit better, and I think they made a decision to have him give the presentation from the Bundestag rather than Mr. Schwartz today. Well, Johannes has been very much involved with us since the very beginning.
Unknown caller.
Let me turn this thing off. Turn my noise off. There. Make sure I got my phone turned off. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the each of your presentations, and then we will be receiving questions that will go to Lucas. And at the end of the forum, we will take the questions. I want to give enough time for everyone to make their presentation prior to the questions. And so to that end, we'll collect those, and Lucas will, then he'll transfer them up here to my assistant who is here. And let me see what this is. Yeah, that? Yes. Okay. You're a great man. Really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn that off. Anyway, we'll take the questions at the end, and let's see what time it is, so that we've got plenty of time for the presentations. Hope that is suitable to everyone, and ideally, if you can stay on board for the questions, that will certainly be of help. Sometimes there's scheduling issues, and I certainly respect that.
So now I'm online. Hello,
Johannes,
Mr.
Mr.
Yes.
Selly. Good
Can
morning.
you see me?
Good afternoon, rather.
Thank
How are
you
you
for
doing?
involving me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. If you can get closer to your microphone or turn your,
Yes,
somehow,
it is.
yeah, get closer to
you
the
can-
screen and closer to the microphone if you can.
So can you understand me?
Yes, sir, I understand you. We just need to have you a little bit louder. So if you're able to get closer or to the mic.
Yes, I can try to do it.
Okay, and try to move your head over a little bit, get it more centered.
Maybe I could use a headset. Maybe the So does it work?
Well, it's clear to me.
Is it better for you?
Yes, it's better. Can you all hear him too?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Good, very good. And if you can try to stay close to the center of the camera so that we don't lose you on the screen. Okay, we've got 1 minute and we will start. And this obviously will be recorded and be sent out. Typically we have somewhere around 2,800 to 3,500 requests for the video. There'll be several hundred people on watching today, but as you would understand, parliamentarians, particularly and government officials, their schedules are lined up either in committees or other requirements. And so providing the video for them is much more suitable. And we've had a lot of great response over people receiving the video. Well, thank you. Let's start. I'm Robert Pittenger. I'm chairman of the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. We welcome you joining us today for our 7th webinar in this series dealing with critical issues of security. We have outstanding individuals today that I know that you will learn much from, as I have over the last 6 to 7 years. As you know, we have hosted our forums throughout the world, and we've involved over 1,600 members of parliament from over 100 countries who have attended. But because of COVID, we chose to initiate these webinars this year. They've really had a great response and frankly broadened our ability to meet and have a dialogue with individuals, though we prefer person-to-person dialogue and exchange. We have found that this is the best means at this time. So we welcome you joining us with us. This will be, I believe, a significant opportunity for you to hear from really the leading experts in the world on trade-based money laundering. This is a very much overlooked and area of transfer of funds by our adversaries, by various terrorist groups particularly, but one that we need to be very cognizant of and learn how we can mitigate and prevent these transfers. We have those who have been working in this area for many, many years and have really been pioneers in addressing trade-based money laundering today. So I do want to encourage you to send your questions in. You can send them to Lucas at pi-sf.com. And if Lucas, you'll put that on the screen, there you are. And Lucas will be here to submit the questions back to me, and we will provide responses. Our members of our panel will at the end of the forum. I would like to say a big thank you to Keegan Spalding. They have been an extraordinary partner and host for us for these forums. We frankly couldn't have done them without them. They are a leading attorney. They're in 21 offices around the world. They provide guidance and counsel on public policy issues to government officials throughout the globe. And I'm particularly grateful for J.C. Boggs, a partner with King and Spalding, who has been a great friend and a board member of the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. And I would say that John Walsh on our panel today is also a member of our board. And we're very grateful for their leadership and for their involvement. We hope to have a forum this year in Panama, co-hosted Crime Stoppers, and looking for that in November, possibly a forum in Washington. We'll see how COVID goes. We'll be able to do that and what type of arrangements and structure that we can have. So be looking forward to seeing many of you there, if your schedules can permit you to be at one or both of those meetings. We'll begin our discussion now. We're very grateful for the leadership of Senator Bill Cassidy. Senator Cassidy has had major interest in trade-based money laundering. I've met with him on several occasions on these issues, and his team really wanted him involved in this discussion as we really did, because he's been a tremendous leader on Capitol Hill, looking for legislative solutions, as well as opportunities to address this in a real practical way, how to prevent the transfer of funds through trade-based money laundering. So if we could, we have a video now from Senator Cassidy. We'll show you this video and then proceed from there. Senator Cassidy.
Thank you, Congressman Pittenger and the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum for inviting me to speak. Illicit financial flows cost the global economy trillions of dollars annually. This can devastate a developing country, can undermine capitalism and rule of law in any country. It is estimated that transnational criminal organizations laundered $300 billion in illicit proceeds through the United States financial system in 2010, which is about 2% of the U.S. GDP. The International Monetary Fund estimates that the global value of money laundering could be as much as 2.7% of the world's GDP, or $1.6 trillion every year. The source of this money includes drug trade, counterfeit goods, human trafficking, many other things, and it's intertwined with tax evasion, disruption of markets, profit loss for legitimate businesses, corruption of government officials and government institutions, and needless to say, it is a persistent threat to our economy and to our security. Now, transnational criminal organizations can form partnerships with international terror groups to create threat networks. And these threat networks share assets to ship illicit goods, launder money, and corrupt government officials and institutions. Now, to further understand trade-based money laundering, or TBML, I requested that the United States Government Accounting Office examine TBML. The GAO interviewed U.S. officials from international bodies, and from U.S. trading partners. Now, first, they identified challenges. Challenges include the involvement of a high number of parties on both sides of a trade. Next, possible collusion between buyers and sellers. Next, the document-centric nature of TBML, which is more document-centric than with any other banking activity. They also identified that the absence of reliable sources of information to verify transactions, such as commodity price list, people who are denied export licenses, and other things, makes it more difficult. And lastly, the reliance on third parties in identifying key players in the transaction, the use of shell corporations, offshore companies, or representative offices in areas known to be complicit with trade-based money laundering. Now, the Government Accounting Office recommended, first, partnerships between governments and the private sector. This is written for the United States. Clearly, it applies to every country. Secondly, training. Again, both for the private sector and the public sector. In the United States, they specifically recommended sharing information through domestic interagency collaboration. But again, this is a recommendation that will work in any country, and I know that the British have adopted such a system. Now, they also specifically call on for international cooperation. This only works if trading partners are able to collaborate in addressing the issue. And lastly, because what is used as a technique of TBML is constantly changing, they recommend ongoing research on the challenges to address trade-based money laundering. Now, to put a point on this, we will only be effective in combating threat networks through the collaboration of our law enforcement, intelligence community, private industry, non-governmental affiliated organizations, the military, partner nations, and we, the citizenry. So building upon this, I have a white paper which calls for developing the appropriate methodologies and systems to integrate trade and intelligence data, number one. Number two, to direct in the United States, but again, I think this would work in any country, to direct our federal government agencies to prioritize TBML through interagency and private sector cooperation. And number three, to enhance cooperation with trading partners to identify, prosecute, and curtail TBML. That is us, you and me, our countries. So I end once more by saying thanks for the opportunity to speak, but also pledging my cooperation with anyone who wishes to join in addressing this international security issue. It will only be solved if we solve it together. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Senator Cassidy. Thank you for Maria Sierra, who is a very a bright, intelligent individual who advises Senator Cassidy on these issues. And we really appreciate the leadership from Senator Cassidy working with us closely, working with the governments throughout the world. I would like to introduce now a very good friend, Mr. Johann Selle from the Bundestag in Germany. We met in 2014. He came to Washington, D.C. at the first meeting we ever had following the Snowden revelations. And he's become a very, very good friend since then, and frankly hosted one of our first forums in Berlin. And so I really appreciate the role of leadership that you played, Mr. Selle, through the years. You've been a great support, great advisor to us. Andreas John, who is on your staff, has been remarkable through the years. You have given great leadership there in the Bundestag, serving on the Economic Development Committee, on Foreign Affairs, Cultural Development. In so many ways, you've served your country with distinction, twice serving in the Bundestag from 1994 to 1998, and then again 2009 until the present. So we appreciate the role that you are playing and the partnership that you have with us in these areas of security. Thank you very much. Mr. Selle, you may proceed.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You may proceed now, sir.
Congressman.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Well, yes, you
I'm
continue
lost.
on.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman Pittenger, for this great introduction. A warmly welcome to all the participants. And first of all, I would like to appreciate all those virtual conferences which address important issues. One of the primary means that criminal and terrorist organizations use to launder illicit proceeds is through trade-based money laundering. This incorporates a range of different techniques with varying levels of complexity. Common forms of trade-based money laundering rely on misrepresenting the price, quantity, type, or beneficial ownership of goods in trade transactions. According to a recent General Accounting Office report, trade-based money laundering accounts for hundreds of billions globally every year and is now a primary method to laundering illicit funds. The US State Department has identified 26 countries having high risks of TBML. 3 trade zones have been identified as particular areas of risk of TBML. The global financial center Dubai is a haven for trade-based money laundering with its nearly 33 trade zones, according to a recent Carnegie Endowments report. Dubai's prosperity is a steady stream of illicit proceeds born from corruption and crime. Corrupt and criminal actors from around the world operate through or from Dubai. Afghan warlords, Russian mobsters, Nigerian kleptocrats, European money launderers, Iranian sanctions busters, and East African gold smugglers all find Dubai a conducive place to operate. Sometimes trade-based money laundering is so mundane that the money laundering is not even suspected by misused companies. For example, around 31 million from the roughly 230 billion laundered through Danske Bank were funneled through German companies, which did not realize they were misused for money laundering. According to the bank statements, the orders and payments came from companies that had accounts with Danske Bank in Estonia. However, the companies were not registered in Estonia. Their headquarters were in Belize, New Zealand, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, or the UK. The recipients of the goods were not the same as the companies that paid for the goods. There were also no direct business relationships between the companies involved. The delivery of the goods went to Russia. Banks are required to report suspicious financial transactions. However, banks often do not have access to the documentation for most of the trade transactions for which they process payments, making it difficult to identify suspicious activity. Because of the large volume of trade, customs agencies also have difficulties identifying fraudulent trade documents that are often mixed in with legitimate trade. As described, trade-based money laundering is international in nature and frequently involves complex, difficult to detect schemes that cut across international borders. TBML poses significant national security risk to all democratic countries. TBML cannot be fought by domestic efforts alone, but rather through international collaboration and international bodies such as FATF, ECMID Group, UNODC. As an inherently transnational activity, global money laundering, and specifically TBML, is perhaps the definitive problem in need of cross-border rules-based cooperation. Instead of fighting the common enemy, the relations between the democratic countries are strained. In order to fight TBML successfully, the G7, the founders of the FATF, have to take the lead again in strengthening and enforcing global anti-money laundering, countering the finance of terror norms. Implementation and enforcement of the norms need to be properly resourced, just like NATO. A universal norm of transparency needs to be established in respect to the beneficial ownership of all asset classes. National registries should be standardized and interconnected to facilitate cooperation. Offshore structures must be made transparent or outlawed. So far, my brief input. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Selle. We so much appreciate your leadership there in the Bundestag and your collaboration with us with these forums throughout the world. You and your team, particularly Andreas John, has been great friends and great allies in support of these efforts. Would like now to introduce John Walsh. John is the CEO of Sitespan, a very remarkable individual, serves on the board of the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum. He has a long background supporting industry and governments throughout the world relative to understanding the data and understanding how they can better secure and follow procedures that will give greater security in their own governments and in their own industries. So John, thank you for your leadership. You have been a remarkable leader for us in our forums, and we really appreciate you traveling all over the world with us to meet with parliamentarians. So John Walsh, you're on. Thank you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's kind of hard to follow up after hearing such things about yourself, so I'll just move on and not say anything else. I always found it very interesting to discuss trade-based money laundering. Most of my career and all of my career before I worked in anti-money laundering or the field of risk management directly, I was a commodity trader. So I traded everything you could possibly think of. I started out on a COMEX trading gold and then went to the Merck, traded oil, coffee, sugar, copper, then left the United States, moved to Mexico, traded products there, and went to Beirut, traded products there. Quite frankly, if there was a market, I would trade it. And that was my world, and everything about my day was waking up, looking at prices, looking at trends, looking at demand around the world, and trying to be the middleman to make a market to profit. That was purely my life. So as time went on, and we were attacked in the United States, like many other countries are attacked on a regular basis. I happened to be in the World Trade Center for both attacks in the United States. And after the second attack, felt the need to engage. And since law enforcement in a lot of different countries seemed to know who I was and had my phone number, I'm not sure how that happened, but I received a couple of phone calls and asked for help. And my initial thought was like, well, I thought you guys knew everything. You always told me you knew everything, and now why do you need me to help you come up with these methodologies of bad guys? And it was very interesting. So when we started the dialogues and I got more involved in this field, we were looking at banks, and it really took me a long time to think about money laundering using cash. I thought it was the most idiotic thing in the world. Like, why would you use cash for money laundering? So I come at this from a different angle. So I look at it like, to me, trade-based money laundering is the way of the world. Going to the bank with $10,000 check or an ATM card or a bank account is not that's not the direct way to, in my world, to launder money. There's a trade, you know, it's too simple to get caught. And you know, and I ran AML and worked at a lot of different places. I set up Bank America years ago with some really good friends, and went to Wachovia, and I deal with a lot of banking clients now, and I see the regulatory agents around the world constantly putting more and more and more pressure on banks. Now, I understand there's some banks that are involved with illicit activity, and there's a lot of banks that are not. But we're always looking at banking rules and regulations, and we leave this whole other world somewhat open, not completely, but it is somewhat open. So trade-based money laundering, to me and to many, and definitely to some of the other speakers who I know and respect, you know, instead of talking about cash, what we're talking about is an asset, a digital asset. A digital asset changes, and it's so different. A digital asset now compared to 10 years ago is very, very different. So we have, and you say digital asset, and everybody thinks about cryptocurrency, and rightfully so. But there's so many other digital assets and assets overall. You know, it was very interesting when I found out that my airline miles is a very, very profitable digital asset. Apparently, people want to have my miles. So I travel internationally. I run an international business. I have a lot of miles. And then, you know, my credit card is linked, so I even get more miles. And then, you know, one big credit card company is always offering me 2 or 3 times my dollar amount in miles. So I go online and I look, and there are people willing to buy my miles. So that's a digital asset. The points on your credit cards, the points at your grocery stores, the points at all of these things are tradable commodities. There's actually websites where you could go and trade your gift cards that you got from your grandmother at Christmas time, or at your birthday or another holiday. There are other lines where you could trade your airline miles. These are all digital assets that perhaps weren't around in the 1970s when the laws were being put together. I went into all this. I was very fortunate to be involved in the GAO review of trade-based money laundering, and I went into all of these topics, and I think we all need to be studying digital assets at a different level, because it's not always what we think. And quite frankly, my sons who are, you know, just out of college, and they have digital assets that they're teaching me now about what is a digital asset, what's not a digital asset. And so we all have to, no matter how much gray hair we all have to be studying on a regular basis. And that's one of the things I love about this. Now, when you get into commodities and other assets, non-dollar, I'll call them non-dollar, non-currency assets. I recently was working on a case with doing an investigation, and there was a tremendous amount of fish meal involved. And it was in a Baltic area, and I mean, the guy's business was fish meal, and I come from Brooklyn, New York, so I know a lot about basketball, and I know a lot about stickball. I don't know anything about fish meal. So what I had to do was what I recommend everybody to do. I went and I said, well, what is fish meal and where is it traded and where do I get information on it? It took me less than 10 minutes to go to the World Bank and look at the commodity indexes and say, okay, fish meal is in the agricultural commodity price index. And this is what's been going on with that price index over the last couple of weeks and past couple of years. And so I called up the gentleman in the fish meal business, I'm going to say in quotes, fish meal business, and I said, well, how much does fish meal cost? And he goes, well, it's very, very expensive. Give me an example. He was like, well, it's about 30,000 a ton. And I said, well, you must sell a tremendous amount of fish meal. He goes, how do you accomplish, how do you account for all of this money? He says, well, I wake up early and I work very hard. This is his answer. This was his answer on the telephone. So, I mean, fish meal trades right now for $1,448 a ton for generic fish meal. That's up from $1,392.96 from last month, and is down 5% from last year. So once you get that information, which is readily available to all of us, once you have that information, you're able to kind of piece together his profit and loss. Because, I mean, I was a trader, so like you're looking to make a big, and which is the difference between the bid and the ask on a regular basis, but you're not making 80, 92, 3, 4, 5, 6, 700% on mispricing commodities as a normal trader. So when I went to the World Bank and I looked at this and I looked at the commodity prices, I realized that there was something wrong there. And it's so easy to not be able to do these things. This was a very specific case with a very specific transaction. There's no way in the world that everybody on this call and all of us speakers put together would be able to do this for every transaction and every investigation. So we have to be able to automate these things in a rational and reasonable way. And that's where data and data management comes in, and some other things that I'll speak about later. But the other thing that concerns me in a great way, having worked on Wall Street for so long and looking at the advancements of derivatives contracts, I don't even know how to trade derivatives contracts anymore. Some of them now are 1,000-page contract, maybe 2,000 page, and up to 3, 4, 5,000 page contracts. And on page 365, there's one line that says, if that happens, this happens, and the price of oil moves this much. And it's almost so complicated that a computer can't follow it from a commodities price index, because it seems so odd that it's now a legal matter to be able to change the price and misprice commodities in a legal fashion. Because the contract doesn't have to be logical and rational. It just has to be legally binding. So somebody might be able to take 3 or 4 oil tankers and change it from $40.50 a barrel, well, wholesale, let's say $40.50 a barrel to $350. It's simple as that. And it's actually legal to do it that way if done in a contractual manner. So if you and I did that, that would be mispricing. The CFTC would call us up and investigate us immediately. But if you do it in the guise of a derivative contract, it's 100% legal. And derivative contracts are not covered under most of the banking rules and regulations. They're outside of that world. So until we start spending time and having forums like this, where we have elected officials involved and we have government regulators involved, where it's kind of like, hey, how do we help each other? Because this is what's going on in the real world. And these legal contracts fall outside of the scope of the BSA banking rules and regulations around the world. The BSA in the United States, but banking regulations around the world. So we have to work together to be able to deal with this. And the other things that concerning from a trade base, we often think trade base, Wall Street, this, that. Audit is a wonderful way to do trade-based money laundering also. And this is something that in the United States, I'm very happy to report that the United States, there was a subcommittee just last week, opened up very, very serious dialogue about adding audit to the list. And one of the reasons why, I mean, who's to determine what a value of a beautiful painting is? To one person, it might be, I look at some artists and I don't particularly like them, I wouldn't give you $50. The same exact painting, somebody that loves art might pay $50 million. Since I don't know the value, I just know what I like and what I don't like. So it's all subjective. But we have to have, I don't know the answers to this, but these are things that we need to discuss. I do know that one of the major problems in audit in the Middle East, where I spend a lot of my time working, is dealing with art from 2,000 to 3,000 years ago and artifacts. There's a mosaic tile from Syria or in the Syria region, which used to be able to go to a souk to buy for maybe $10 or $15 as a souvenir. Now trades on Facebook and other, well, I don't want to, now trades on multiple social media platforms and trade platforms for $20,000 to $30,000. So one thing, all of a sudden somebody discovered some really, really cool tiles from Syria, or it's a great way to sell a $15 item for $30,000. One of those is true. But we have to be looking at these things when something changes in that dramatic value and manner. There's something to be looked at. Excuse me. Now, for the sake of time, I could go into thousands of ways to do trade-based money laundering. Thousands. If you could hold it up, I could do it with this pen. I could do it with this phone. Water is a wonderful trade-based commodity. You can make and launder so much money with water. As a matter of fact, we have some famous people in the United States that tried to corner the silver market, trying to corner the water market in California about 10 to 20 years ago. They were just buying up all the water. And then, so the price of water was changing on a daily basis at a rate farmers couldn't even comprehend. So, I mean, if you look at any commodity, I could misprice the commodity and make money off of it in an illicit manner. Now, I'm not saying we need to end commodity trading, the world would stop. But if we stopped using currency, the world would continue. We have digital assets. If we stopped doing commodities, the world would absolutely stop tomorrow. So we can't say no more trading. What we need to do is how do we have safe trading? Now, one of the things that I feel strongly about, and we perhaps Congressman Pittenger and I will discuss this. A great topic might be smart contracts, but I'm going to conclude with some things on smart contracts using various techniques. But smart contracts have been around since 1994. The term smart contract started to circulate in 1994. Here we are in 2020, and most people still don't use them, don't have them, and they're not accessible. They're not accepted still. So at some point, we're going to have to look at smart contracts, which remove the middleman and allow the contracts to be written by knowledgeable people, because it's two parties involved in the product itself, and being able to design methodologies to transfer the money in a logical fashion, but also in a logical methodology that makes sense. And if a smart contract is changed, there'll be ways for both the buyer and the seller to be able to rectify that and deal with it. Now, one of the things I hear about smart contracts is it always makes the news when a smart contract gets hacked. And I really want to speak to everybody. Let's look at the biggest hack that I know with a smart contract was $50 million. And that's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I mean, to me, $50 is a lot of money. But we look at these contracts that were hacked to 8 million, 50 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but identity theft is costing, in the US alone, $17 billion a year. So if you have these oddities where you have these smart contracts, so we're going to do away with something that gets hacked once in a while, when we know the other side, there's trade-based money laundering in the trillions of dollars and identity theft is in the billions of dollars. It's not logical to me. We need to spend more time looking at smart contracts. We have to do this. I'm really asking every elected official to take some time and learn about this, because it's not only a way to deal with the legal profession when it comes to this area. It's a way that we could all better understand. One of the things that you could do with smart contracts is link it to commodity price indexes. So, and you could automatically be looking at contracts to make sure that there's not a price disparity of anything over X percent. And if you're in the legal side, or if you're in law enforcement, you want to look at contracts maybe over 20%, over 30. Depends on the case that you're working on and what you're doing. So in conclusion, I'd like to mention some things, maybe some solutions. Smart contracts I would put up there as something that we should all be looking at. I think we need to educate people and society. Society needs to be educated as far as trade-based money laundering. I think we're doing a very good job of educating people on human trafficking. 15 years ago, that was not a topic that was on everybody's lips, but it is now. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But that only happened through education, what I call social education, social responsibility. So if we start an education process around trade-based money laundering, maybe we would be able to get people to stop buying fake items, counterfeit items. Maybe we would stop people from trading human beings. Maybe we have to take it to the next level and say, don't be buying items that you know are fraudulent. Don't be overpaying for commodities and somebody says, I'll give you cash back. There's a lot of different things that we could educate people on, and it would work very well. So we need to deal with social responsibility. And I think the education side is important. And we have to look at price monitoring in a different way. Commodities trade all the time, and a lot of prices are now available that weren't available 10 or 15 years ago. They're readily available. Fish meal. I didn't know anything about fish meal. I know the price of fish meal for the past 22 years. I know agricultural fish meal. I know sanitized fish meal. I got it all in 15 to 20 minutes on the internet. So we have this wonderful, wonderful tool. We have to, and everybody's saying how bad the internet is. Why not? We have to use it as the tool that it is. It's wonderful, wonderful information. And we have to be looking at customs offices and customs overall. I mean, if we have people looking at contracts that were written using a methodology that's been around for 3,000 years, and they have no authority, and we're not teaching them, I mean, we can't blame customs when things are happening beyond their control. We need to support them. We need to document things, and we need to not only educate society, but empower the customs officers to really, really be able to deal with and not just stop things, but actually facilitate the arrest and investigation at a much different level around the world than we do now. So I think those are some of the recommendations that I would present. I think the wonderful thing, I'm really happy about what happened in the United States last week with the serious discussion on adding art. We can't just focus on the banks, because I really believed that when I got involved in this business, I had no idea why anybody would actually use cash to launder money when it's so easy to use other items. You could have an oil tanker leave Dubai, and by the time it gets to New York, you could change the price 142 times, and nobody knows. So I mean, while you're doing that, I don't understand why I'm going to go to the bank and put $11,000 in. I mean, you know, me and all my Cuban old lady friends will all be arrested for putting out $11,000 in, but the tanker changes price 150 times. We really need to be looking at this in a different way. So I'll pass it back to the group. Congressman Pittenger, it's wonderful to be involved with you for these past 6 years. The other speakers are wonderful, and I'm really going to pass it off to them. And I do want to thank SAS for being the sponsor of the group overall, and we really do appreciate that support. Thank you.
Thank you, John. A great patriot and great warrior. And we really appreciate your commitment and support all these years. I would like now to introduce a great friend, a real mentor to me as well, John Cassara. He's one of the very few people who's been a clandestine operations officer in the U.S. intelligence community, as well as being a special agent in the Department of Treasury. He has a unique perspective over the last 35 to 40 years. He's written a number of books, one of which I have right here that I really commend to you to get and to read on money laundering. It's a tremendous book. He's written several others. I've read them all. And John, thank you for your leadership. You're the godfather of trade transparency units. We have financial intelligence units. You have recognized the need to build collaboration among countries regarding the trade-based money laundering through this concept of trade transparency units. We really appreciate your leadership, and thank you for your engagement with us today.
Pittenger, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you and this very distinguished panel and people from all around the world to talk about this topic of trade-based money laundering. It's vitally important, and as John just said, it does not get the attention it deserves. Normally when I talk about TBML, trade-based money laundering, I like to talk about what it is. I like to talk about different types of TBML, the magnitude of the problem, give lots of examples. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to focus my remarks on countermeasures. So I'm going to briefly mention, perhaps a half dozen countermeasures. Some involve government, some involve industry, and some deal with data and technology. The first countermeasure I want to talk about is the one that the Congressman just mentioned, and that is trade transparency units, or TTUs. similar to John's conversation, TTUs, a lot of people don't know this, actually kind of were birthed at the time of 9/11. Because just like John, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I spent a lot of time in South Asia, a lot of places where our adversaries operated. And I was convinced that if we're looking at threat finance, we had to look at trade-based value transfer and underground financial systems like Hawala and how trade is used to settle accounts. So having spent a lot of time at Treasury's FinCEN, our financial intelligence unit, and also have spent a lot of time in U.S. Customs Service, I thought, wouldn't it be possible to create a Egmont group of financial intelligence units equivalent, but basically using trade data? Because every country in the world has a customs service. Every country in the world can look at this trade data and spot anomalies. Long story short, I proposed this, and the US government adopted it about 2004, 2005, and it is now part of our national anti-money laundering strategy. Today, a TTU is formed when Homeland Security investigations, now customs, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and any of the U.S. trading partners agree to exchange trade data via customs to customs agreements. And they do this because you want to identify the data, you want to do comparisons, and you want to do analysis. The wonderful thing about this TTU initiative, though, is because this data already exists. There's no need for vast new expenditures or to struggle through the labyrinth of bureaucratic hoops and approvals. Every country in the world already collects this data and associated information. So the TTU can also receive and disseminate targeted import and export data from its counterparts in partner countries. This is at the heart of it, because by comparing imports and exports, you can spot those anomalies. You can see both sides of that trade transaction. And then you can do additional things. You can add value to it by overlaying financial intelligence, travel data, business registrations, and other data sets. As a result, the TTUs can spot these anomalies. It could be indicative of simple customs fraud, tax evasion, contraband smuggling, or it could be trade-based money laundering and the back door into some of these underground financial systems. We briefly talked about it. Of course, investigations are still required. You can spot the anomalies, but you still have to hand this thing off to the investigators, and they have to knock on the doors and interview the right people. The TTU initiative has proven to be effective. As of 2015, the network has seized well over $1 billion in assets. In 2020, there are 17 operational TTUs in our international network. However, the TTU network has also never come close to achieving its potential. Thanks to Senator Cassidy, this GAO, or Accountability Office of the US government, is conducting a congressionally mandated review of the program. We'll all agree the TTU's concept is very, very good. There have been numerous issues with its management and implementation. So the jury is still out, but I'm optimistic. Another countermeasure that I think is important that's overlooked is simply giving customs inspectors investigative authority. We have that here in the United States in the sense that our customs service is kind of broken between traditional inspection and control, but also ICE agents have investigative authority. They have the authority to conduct investigations. They carry a badge, they carry a gun, they can present a case to a prosecutor. That doesn't generally happen overseas. In most customs services, they perform the traditional and absolutely essential role of inspection and control. They levy duties, taxes, and tariffs. That's it. If they should see a trade-based money laundering scheme, that's basically, they don't do much with it. They may hand it off to the National Police Force or the Fiscal Police, but the problem there is that the National Police probably doesn't have a lot of expertise in trade fraud. So a lot of these cases, they don't get worked, okay? Another thing I want to mention is prosecutors. There's a dearth of TDML cases around the world. And this is crazy because I can make a very convincing argument that trade-based money laundering in all its varied forms is the biggest money laundering methodology in the world. But one of the primary reasons why we don't have more cases is because of prosecutors and magistrates. They don't like the cases. I mean, I'm generalizing, I'm simplifying. But generally speaking, they don't find them very sexy. They're not very exciting. And they don't understand them. They have little jury appeal, so they don't take them. This has to change. We need to offer more training and expertise in customs fraud. We really do need to make a much more concerted effort to work with magistrates and prosecutors and educate them on why this is vitally important. Another topic I want to talk about, and this is a little awkward for me, is data and technology, because I'm not a technology guy, and I'm also, I think Eric's going to follow me or another speaker and talk a lot more about these technology issues and all the things that can be done to combat trade fraud. But suffice it to say, we barely scratched the surface here in applying data analytics and technology to combat TDML. One of the things that has just amazed me over the last 3 or 4 years, because I've been looking at this for so much longer, is the explosion of trade data sources that are now publicly available. You've got things like the United Nations Comtrade database, Datamine, Peers, Import Genius, Panjiva, TradeSpark, Wiser Trade, InfoDrive India, SciSex, and so many more. In addition, you've got some really smart people out there doing great work like Dr. Zantanowicz. He offers International Trade Alert and Global Financial Integrity. I'm on the board of directors. Offers GF Trade for trade price anomaly detection based on world norm trade price analysis and related information. Super tools. I only wish I had them back when I was in the field doing investigations. Many experts believe that distributed ledger technology, such as blockchain, represents great promise in detecting and preventing trade misinvoicing, which is the biggest component of trade-based money laundering. There are 3 possible countermeasures here. The first is comparing invoices to each other. The second is comparing invoices against generally accepted market prices. And the third is comparing values declared to customs and the values in the financial transactions. In the first option, customs authorities and other relevant smart partners could use the information available on distributed ledger technology platform and compare the invoice submitted by the exporter to the invoice submitted by the importer. The analytic platform could compare the 2 documents, adjusting for cost, insurance, and freight, ensure there's no document tampering. Import and export invoice comparison would also allow customs on both sides to identify misinvoicing and charge the correct export or import duties. However, this comparison would not identify what they call same invoice faking, where the trader partners are working together and basically set a price that is erroneous. It doesn't match world pricing. So the next option would be for customs authorities and smart partners to compare invoices against generally accepted market price. This is what I was talking about earlier about Global Financial Integrity's GF Trade. It already uses this technique to compare the invoiced value with that of the same product it's trading for, based on updated official government data from over 43 countries. This allows customs authorities to identify possible trade misinvoicing, even when the shipment's still in port, and the correct duties can then be levied. And then a third option, if it's applicable, is distributed ledger technology comparing invoices presented to customs with the value sent to the financial institutions involved in the letter of credit process. And then I said, if applicable, because one of the problems we have here, when we talk about trade-based money laundering, is about 80% of international trade is open accounts, meaning no trade finance is involved at all. There are already prototypes for some of the above in government and industry. The last TBML countermeasure I would like to mention is the latest generation of what they call smart shipping containers. Studies show that a single shipping transaction involves an average of 28 different entities, including ports and forwarders and carriers and customs agencies and insurance offices, et cetera, et cetera. Smart containers offer real-time monitoring anywhere in the world of a container's location, its internal conditions, and its physical integrity. New technology features access controls so that each container remains sealed until the shipper authorizes the opening of each container. The data generated for each container can also provide customs agencies an additional tool to identify safe containers that qualify for expedited clearance. So in conclusion, there are a lot of very good TBML countermeasures out there. The large question is whether or not policymakers want to move in the direction of international trade transparency. I think it's a really important question. And I think this is why this is a perfect topic for this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Your counsel and direction to policymakers has had a substantial impact. It has on me and my colleagues in the Congress, and you will continue to show and demonstrate your influence and your knowledge throughout the world. We welcome your involvement continually. I think as each of us wants to engage and understand trade-based money laundering, you've got to understand the analytics of data. And that's why it was so important that we have SAS join us on this webinar. I'm so grateful. They have been partners and gone with us around the globe, because understanding data and analyzing data is critical in the flow of money, the flow of contraband, the trade-based money laundering, and many aspects that is important for each of you. So I commend to you, J.R. Helmig has been a great ally and been willing to go with us around the world, and has helped many countries understand the proper use of data and what can be done in their own country technologically to support their efforts to enhance their data capabilities. So SAS is a company I've worked with for probably 16 or 17 years when I was in the state Senate. They helped me in North Carolina address Medicaid fraud. And that's why I'm so grateful to have their support and their involvement in this arena. Eric Herson is the chief person involved with SAS directing their industry consultants area. And thank you for joining us today. You have 30 years of experience, assisting clients throughout the globe on analyzing data. SAS is the largest data artificial intelligence company in the world. And we really appreciate the key role that you have played and will play in supporting all of us to address these critical security issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. And Lucas has some slides he's going to help me with. And while he's framing all that, very kind remarks from all. At SAS, indeed, we are data geeks, and I would describe myself as a fraud and trade-based money laundering enthusiast. None of us can be experts because this world changes every day. And as you've mentioned, SAS first and foremost is an analytics company. Our primary clients are governments, including tax, monetary authorities, regulators, and financial services, meaning banks. I have a banking financial services background. And simply put, our goal is to use math to find trade-based money laundering anomalies and to aid investigations. And as John Walsh mentioned, anomalies surrounding fish meal and water and many other commodities. My goal is to put kind of a here and now spin, if you will, on what we are seeing through our clients' eyes and lens, is how COVID is affecting trade and trade-based money laundering. I mean, we're already seeing evidence that the bad actors are able to hide under this uncertain world of COVID and try to take advantage. A promise here, I'm not going to be spending time talking about how we got here or restating the same tired messages about COVID. And I promise this will not be a commercial for my employer. What I'm trying to do today is describe what quantitative companies like SAS are doing to modernize how governments and banks deal with this constant change and share our observations. I believe most everyone here agrees that trade finance is one of the last remaining vestiges to hide dark money, aid in capital flight, and potentially shield the purchase of illicit luxury real estate. And we joke internally at SAS is that trade finance is still the wild, wild west to move lots of money. And why is that? Again, an observation is that from a banking services perspective, financial service perspective, most trade operations exist outside of the domain of anti-money laundering investigative units. And as you've been hearing, and I'll emphasize later, trade is largely paper-based and depends on a lot of manual, meaning human document reviews ad nauseum, which makes it easier for bad actors to take advantage. I want to say, raising my right hand, is that using math and science and software is not about replacing people. It's about making sense of all the noise. We serve government and financial industries, helping with software and platforms to, as I like to describe it, use analytics to identify the edge cases, the trade transactions that in real time either present low risk or no risk and let them sail through a transparent and well-documented process. And at the same time, really hone in on those trades and the data associated with those trades that warrant hardcore investigations. So I'm going to be talking about technology and analytics and capabilities that, frankly, capabilities that exist today to help everybody get back to work. Next slide, please. And I should have said that. The key themes as mentioned, and let's go another slide, Lucas. From a practitioner's perspective, when we do a deep dive analysis into the trade finance industry, and that's the process, the people, the mechanics behind how trades are made, we see that it's a perfect storm. A pandemic and the complexity of transactions allow the bad actors to hide behind all the complications associated with trade and help criminal organizations transfer value across borders. Level setting trade finance is difficult, but our clients, the banking side, want to make sure that they are dealing with what I call the alphabet soup of ever-changing regulatory obligations. And I know, as we say in Georgia, where I live, I'm preaching to the choir, misuse of international trade as a way to move money, disguise its origins, has been around for a long time. And we also, as practitioners, fully realize that we need to help our clients focus on the mechanics of how trades are made, on the how, on the process. And that sort of distills down quickly to being able to understand and digitize paper, bills of ladings, invoices, pricing changes, insurance, shipping manifests, many amendments. And the journey starts with adding intelligence to the understanding of what the words mean off of the paper. So there are a lot of science involved in digitizing and using things like natural language processing and content categorization to figure out what the words mean. And if we do this right, using smart math, we can smoke out those bad actors that are trying to game the system, if you will, with over and under invoicing. short and over shipping, and then the phantom shipping, where documentation is completely falsified and there's no shipping at all. Another hardcore focus is around military and dual-use goods, the ugly implication of these goods that can be used for both illicit military and civilian purposes and can contribute to the proliferation of weapons of war. And beyond the regulatory implications, having controls in place guard against loss of reputation and fines. Pre-COVID, the trade business was already highly constrained. The margins were exceedingly thin. Regulatory adherence is an expense. It's not a revenue generator, and it took too long to make decisions, so customer friction. We've talked about the mountain of paper that our clients dealt with on both the banking and regulatory sides of the offense. And traditionally, the only way for trade operations to grow was to hire more people. So there has to be a better way. We realize that potentially 40, if not more percent of trade operation costs from a banking perspective is consumed by humans looking at documents. We all see the evidence surrounding COVID, and shipping from Asia and China went dark for 3 months, and the expectation as the curtain lifts further, trade activity will begin to explode. We're seeing it now in the volumes as middlemen, manufacturers, and companies need to increase inventory levels and seek needed cash flow. And in the U.S., and similar programs exist in other countries, the so-called PPP or Paycheck Protection Loans, with very limited underwriting and almost no due diligence or onboarding, can be used to hide small dollar amount, if you will, or amounts of trade finance related activity. We expect that there's a ripple effect. Our clients are already seeing it. And what our clients, both from the banking and government, are worried about is the fallout when company owners begin to default in 3 to 6 months, and we find that there have been some trade aspects to what they do. The other side of this is that if we put in systems that provide control, wouldn't it be nice if you had an early warning barometer that lets you know whether businesses or trades are trying to game the system to get around the regulators? Lucas, next slide, please. One of the first principles behind what we're doing as an industry was to produce and put in a platform that makes it very, very easy to keep up with institutional change that's foisted on the industry, if you will, by all the monetary authorities and the global regulators. I mean, it's a necessary evil. Rules need to be in place. And at the same time, what we've done as an industry is gather a list of what I'll call scenarios, the rules that make it, I won't say easy, but make it possible for our clients, both on the government and banking sides of the fence, to be able to look at all of the data that are presented and to make something into a robotic or risk-based assessment of trade. Monetary authorities like Singapore are already saying that you as a trader need to be much more aggressive in applying artificial intelligence to examine trade. So if you trade through Singapore, then they're asking you to adopt a so-called score-based decision. That sounds ominous, but we really should be calling it decisions based upon data coupled with investigators, understanding and using automation that mirror the experience of your most seasoned investigators. And to the point, imagine being able to surface and observe, flag and investigate by using math and software. Whether or not these trades make sense, context would be real world use cases. 20-ton container that has $3 million worth of t-shirts. How is that possible? Does it make sense? And how does this trade compare to a shipper's past trade and against their peers? Anomaly or not. The software and the external data can also track vessel name changes in real time. And then the overused example about if a trade contains aluminum nitrate, does it make sense in the context of the shipper's business? Maybe they do ag shipments all the time and there's no danger involved, but we're able to do everything from track, vessel history, look for turning transponders off near the North Korean coast, and more formally, understand the history of all the unique beneficial owners that are associated with a trade. I mean, these are just a few very quick edge cases that we are very successfully helping our clients identify the trades that warrant further investigation. Lucas, next slide, please. And try to be brief on this one. But these are the typical use areas, the use cases that we concentrate on as an industry. They are familiar, they are well documented, and I will say that being able to use a operational software platform makes this process not only uniform, but defensible by providing a trail to help all parties involved understand why the decisions were made and what data was originally involved to make those decisions. Next slide, please, Lucas. So we're often asked, how does trade-based money laundering differ from anti-money laundering transaction monitoring, if you will, or transmon systems? And simply put, there are a couple of noted departures from the world of AML. When it comes to trade-based money laundering, regulators are pushing for real-time or near real-time decisioning, which is different from AML transaction monitoring, which can occur or does occur after the fact on a periodic basis. Another area of separation is that we have observed that traditional AML systems that are rule-bound tend to generate far too many false positives, which need to be unwound and documented and acknowledged. So that is preventing the flow of transactions and causing a lot of customer friction. From a practitioner's perspective, we know as well that there has to be a fraud focus and there's unique intellectual property involved, looking at trades versus AML, and as well as new types of data sources that need to be implemented into the process. So using a standard AML transmon system is generally not appropriate to understand and monitor and smoke out anomalies associated with trade. Next slide, Lucas. So here's a brief war story of a customer that we've worked with for a couple of years. This client, it's one of the world's top 5 global trade banks, and we've worked with them for 4 or 5 years now. But their focus, if you will, was around efficiency and cost takeout. And what this slide is trying to do is show that the science and the math works. They call it their next generation trade platform. And in truth, companies like SAS, we work with their investigators to mirror and mimic the good decisions and train our machine learning models on what to look for. And after 2 years of effort with 9 million transactions and more than 25 million documents processed, they would tell you that the human decisions would agree with the accuracy of the machine over 90% of the time. And that led to a huge increase in operational efficiency. So, this is a one-sided outcome from a banking perspective, but it shows that there's merit in the approach. And as quants, we're proud of the result. Next slide, please. So let me talk about what is or should be in a compliance platform. And, I can't help myself. I've grown up around analytics, and we look at the world as not necessarily a series of equations, but how do we take good science and robust analytics that have been around for a long time and focus them on solving a business problem like trade-based money laundering. And the first thing we do is that we need to have a platform that incorporates the business rules, which I call the known knowns. These are all the rules that come from the regulators and banking's own rules that have made them successful, coupled with predictive modeling, to look for the unknown unknowns. And this is, machine learning of all sorts. And I mentioned text and predictive analytics that understand the documents. And finally, link analysis. We could spend a lot of time talking about this, but basically we're looking for degrees of association between all the bad actors and all of the data that's associated with the trade. And when we get this right and have a library of scenarios baked in, we're taking risk factors and what the monetary authorities want in terms of risk-based decisioning, and able to produce a score. No mystery there. And score coupled with a risk policy makes for a competent automated decision. And I've given a 2-minute talk to what should be a much longer explanation. But I won't say, trust me, it works, but the math that is being utilized here has been in place and in practice for a long period of time. Next slide, please. So I'm coming to the end of my talk here, but I'm trying to suggest that, where is the industry going, and where are we as vendors of the service industry being asked to take clients? And it really boils down to this graphic. From a banking perspective, our clients are interested in using science, an operational platform, to take today's almost 100% manual review of documentation to a much brighter future where they have a lion's share of their trade book just sail through the system with no human interaction, because there are no risks associated with the transaction. And at the same time, to, in real time, auto-escalate the trades and the documentation and all the aspects of a trade that warrant further investigation. And from a compliance review is to chop down, eliminate the massive current amount of false positives to something that is more workable, where once again, it's about focus, it's about alignment. And if we can help our clients and help both from the regulatory and banking side, eliminate over 50% of today's investigations or false positives that need to be documented and cleared, we're really on to something and have helped the industry with huge operational gains. Next slide, please. And John Cassara, I put this together before I heard your remarks, but spot on, brother. I didn't use trade transparency units initially, but then I said, why not? I don't think I would get your dander up, but this is our call to action. And it's that we ask all financial institutions, all, whether it's customs, regulatory, work together. We need help around the pricing dimension. And when we get that right, and when you're asked to share your institution anonymized regional pricing data, that's going to benefit all of us and help close the door on illicit trade-based money movement or trade, or close more of the door. I can't tell you enough from a personal perspective how important this is, but when asked, please contribute. And thanks everyone for their time today. This is an exciting topic, and thanks for letting us participate.
Thank you, Eric. A tremendous presentation. Really, again, appreciate the role and the leadership of SAS, as they have provided great counsel to governments throughout the world, traveling with us to these forums. And I appreciate your role and that of J.R. Helmig.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Efforts. Yes, sir. Well, we had Emmanuel Adelinke on the line. I don't know whether we have lost him or not. He is. He rose up. I thought I'd lost you, Emmanuel. Well, he's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and also with the Center on Economic and Financial Power there at FDD. Emmanuel has focused his efforts on the role of Hezbollah in Latin America on illicit finance issues relative to Iran's history support in that area. I have found him to be tremendously insightful and frankly one of the best warriors we have. Emmanuel will go to hell with a water gun in his hand. He is a very courageous man, someone who played a key role with us as we had our forum in Paraguay. And shortly after it, they did designate Hezbollah a terrorist organization, but frankly, it was we got into a real media spat, and it raised the level. It was front page of the paper for 3 days in a row, headlines, and he was centerfold in that debate. He has been a real warrior, particularly in the tri-border area of Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. So thank you for your participation, your leadership, Emmanuel. You understand the confluence and the nexus of the drug cartels, working with the terrorist groups like a few others. So appreciate your role in being with us today.
Good morning, everyone, and I want to thank you, Congressman Pittenger, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this platform. I want to thank your forum for its relentless pursuit of these issues. I also have to say I feel humbled to speak last after this amazing lineup of experts. I do not consider myself one. I'm more of a storyteller and a student, and all of the people who have just preceded me are my teachers and mentors. If you allow me, given my Italian background and my awareness of American pop culture, I do not know if I would refer to John Cassara as the godfather, maybe the high priest, and the patriarch in this difficult and developing field of research. But I don't know if I can add anything. I feel very much that this is a situation where I'm, you know, everything has been said, but not everybody did. So I have to try to figure out a way to contribute, with information that will add to all the wisdom that has already been imparted. So I thought that maybe I could contribute by providing some concrete examples and insights, and through that spot some of the challenges that this complicated issue offers to government, law enforcement, private sector, intelligence community, and the like. And in order to do that, given my focus on Latin America, in particular the tri-border area, and yes, I do have the scars still to show from that very public spat back in 2019. I wanted to use my time to talk about the role that Lebanese Hezbollah plays in this complicated illicit set of illicit schemes. As all of you, I'm sure, know, the Lebanese Hezbollah has been present in Latin America for 4 decades now, not only in Latin America. It has, from the very moment it was established by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards in Lebanon at the beginning of the 1980s, acted as a tool for the export of the Iranian Revolution, and has therefore sought to implant itself within the vast Lebanese Shia diaspora across the globe in order to exert control, spread its doctrine, and leverage subsequently those communities for its own purposes. Latin America is one of the many places where these communities exist, but indeed they offer a global network of merchants and traders, many of whom feel, for a variety of reasons, loyalty, membership, family connections, the desire and the duty, or sometimes are under pressure to provide assistance. Now, the story of Hezbollah and trade-based money laundering is one where 4 phenomena converge and meet, so to speak, to share a meal. These are, of course, organized crime, trade-based money laundering, terror finance, and terrorism. Now, Hezbollah, over the years, as its budget grew and its role as an Iranian proxy developed from being a player in Lebanese politics and a militia to being the executioner of terror attacks, to becoming the trainer, inspirer, prototype model of global terrorism and Shia sectarian militias in the region. The budget grew, and increasingly Hezbollah sought to find independent sources of funding aside from the very generous contributions that came directly from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And in the course of developing these sources, it increasingly became a service provider for organized crime across the world. Because of the global nature of its networks, Hezbollah can provide organized crime across the world with services that they themselves cannot fully develop on their own, or Hezbollah makes it more convenient in price terms, and it also spares potentially the inevitable conflicts that arise when organized crime ventures into the territories of other criminal organizations. I usually try to explain to audiences how Hezbollah does that and in which ways these services are useful by drawing three analogies from the legitimate global commerce and trade world. Hezbollah to organized crime is basically three things: DHL, Amazon, and Western Union. In what way? Hezbollah is DHL in the sense that when organized crime needs to deliver illicit goods from one point of the globe to the next, from the supplier to the buyer, Hezbollah can provide the delivery vectors to make cocaine, for example, available to European organized crime networks that buy it from Colombian cartels. It is also Amazon in the sense that in addition to providing the delivery service, it becomes an intermediary and a marketing middleman for the products. It will buy its own cocaine, deliver it to the buyers, and help with the distribution. It is also Western Union in the sense that once the illicit merchandise has been transferred, Hezbollah also provides a global network of merchants and businesses that engage in fraudulent transactions to facilitate the repatriation of the ill-gotten gains of the sale of illicit merchandise, such as drugs, such as weapons, and so on. And that's where trade-based money laundering comes in. And of course, there are places where trade-based money laundering is easier to be carried out than others, places where institutions are weak, or the government capacity to manage these complex cases, as John indicated in his presentation, is limited either because of lack of interest by prosecutors or lack of training and understanding of the complexity of these multi-jurisdictional schemes. So Hezbollah provides these services, and it has developed over the years a presence in critical centers across the globe that, because of the weakness of institutions, the corruption of officials, the nature of the local economies and so on, have become, have lent themselves to this type of activity. The tri-border area is one, by all means, not the only one. We can think of the free trade zones in a variety of points in the globe, such as Colón in Panama, Iquique in Chile, the Jebel Ali Free Zone in Dubai, and other places. In all of these places, Hezbollah has a presence through front companies, and these front companies, of course, are involved in a variety of trades. Previous speakers indicated that this is a constantly developing challenge, a moving target. A financial and forensic experts version of the Leonardo DiCaprio movie Catch Me If You Can, where things are constantly developed and devised in new ingenious ways in order to elude the attention or to move value in ways that most officials and the private and the public at large would identify as innocuous and not worthy of attention. So I want to offer three examples here from recent cases or ongoing investigations that I think can highlight both these challenges and the problems that we confront. The first is something that has been referred to frequently as black cocaine. And if you allow me, I am going to try and share with you, I'm going to try and share with you a screenshot from my computer, just to give you a sense of the problem. Are you all seeing the infographic on my screen right now?
Yes.
So these are a number of cases, all from media reports from 2012 to 2019, mostly from Latin America, although there is one case specifically from Indonesia, where port authorities, financial crimes, law enforcement agencies, and so on, seized large quantities of cocaine disguised as charcoal. And when I say disguised as charcoal here, I'm referring to two different typologies. One, the bricks of cocaine are hidden inside bags of charcoal, or more interestingly, the cocaine is processed by chemical engineers hired by the cartels in labs to look like charcoal briquettes. It is then mixed with authentic charcoal and shipped to distant destinations, where then other chemical engineers working for the cartels or for the buyers will extract the charcoal briquettes, reverse engineer the product, and turn it back into cocaine that is marketable on the streets of Western societies. Now, as you can see, this is something that has been ongoing, and as you all know, seizures usually tend to be a small percentage of the actual volume of illicit merchandise that travels. And I am stop sharing just to go back to the point. This is, again, a product that most people would consider to be innocuous, right? We use charcoal for barbecue. It's summer. We just had the 4th of July celebrations here in America. People don't see that as a problem. Charcoal is used extensively and widely across the world, across a variety of cuisines, to produce food we all eat. In the Middle East, it is widely used to smoke the trademark water pipe that many Middle Easterners use and consider to be a trademark of their culture and way of life. So it is innocuous. Well, increasingly we see a trend whereby Lebanese merchants linked in a variety of ways to Hezbollah are using this product in Latin America, in Africa, to cover shipments of cocaine. And there are all sorts of implications to this type of trade, and I'm just using this as one of many examples. For example, there is an impact on the environment and on climate change. Two of the principal sources of charcoal production in Latin America are the Amazon and the Chaco region, the largest and most biodiverse zone in the world, and the second largest and most biodiverse forest zone in the world. They are being cut down at the pace of hundreds of football stadiums every day in order to produce this type of merchandise that is then directed as a cover for cocaine. So the implications of this type of illicit trade are not just the moving of value and the moving of illicit goods, but they also have policy implications across the board that cause damage, irreparable sometimes, to our society. Now, this is not a menial or a small issue. When the DEA in 2016, in cooperation with 7 law enforcement authorities in Europe, launched Operation Cedar and rounded up dozens of Hezbollah operatives and financiers in Europe that were running a complex multi-million-dollar scheme to bring Latin American cocaine into Europe, sell it, and use the proceeds to buy weapons for Hezbollah's role in Syria. One of the key figures that was arrested, unfortunately released briefly after the operation, was a gentleman named Hassan Mohsen Mansour, a Colombian/Canadian/Lebanese national who was moving cocaine under the guise of charcoal from Colombia all the way to Australia. He is now one of 3 co-defendants in a Miami-Dade County, Florida, Hezbollah money laundering case that has been prosecuted here in the US. So from that one case involving this product that seems to be innocuous and irrelevant to our concern, you can see how creativity, ingenuity at the service of evil can actually have global negative repercussions. It pollutes our societies with drugs. It pollutes our financial systems. It tampers with global trade. It finances corruption in the process because, of course, these movement of goods happen thanks to colluding authorities at both ends of the shipment. It has an impact on the environment, and the list is long. So this is the challenge. Number 1, identifying the continuing creativity of our enemies in devising new ways to move illicit merchandise and to launder it, and engage partners in multiple jurisdictions to figure out these complex schemes and identify vulnerable points of pressure where action can be taken to disrupt and bring these activities to an end. The second example is that, of course, when you look at TBML in conjunction to Hezbollah especially, but not exclusively, you often find that there is not just a nexus between organized crime and terror finance through TBML, because of course, Hezbollah does provide these services in exchange for a commission, which then goes to finance its activities. But you also find a terror nexus, not just finance, but planning of terror attacks. And here the example, of course, is Panama. As many of you know, the US law enforcement authorities arrested a Hezbollah operative in 2017, a gentleman named Samer El-Debek, here in the United States. El-Debek was an explosive expert who had been trained to turn the chemicals contained in commercial ice packs, the ones that we can buy at a pharmacy, into explosives. And he was tasked to scout the Panama Canal with an eye to potentially organizing a terror attack on the canal itself. An attack on the canal, I don't need to explain, would have had devastating repercussions on global commerce, on the local economies, quite aside, of course, from the immediate loss of life which a successful attack would have caused. Now, here's the connection. Somebody who plans a terror attack by relying on commercially procured dual-use goods such as ice packs requires the support and infrastructure of a seemingly legitimate set of commercial enterprises in order to provide the goods and store them safely until such a time when the organization decides to send the operatives in charge of carrying out the actual attack. And that is, again, what this network of money launderers in Latin America and other places can provide. Not only do they help organized crime, but they also, when needed and when required, will activate themselves to facilitate the organization and carrying out of terror attacks through the provision of infrastructure, logistics, safe houses, fake documents, escape routes, and other such tools that are indispensable for an organization like Hezbollah to carry out a terror attack. The third point that I wanted to, or the third example that I wanted to highlight as a challenge is, the problem of cooperation between the private and the public sector in confronting this challenge. Is something that all of you, with your own experience, have highlighted and are very familiar with. But again, I wanted to draw your attention to a case or to a set of cases arising from Florida involving, once again, trade-based money laundering, likely for the benefit of both organized crime and Hezbollah terror finance. One case involves a gentleman named Ali or Alec Kassir, who was indicted and convicted in Miami for money laundering, trading in counterfeit goods, and also acting as an unlicensed money remitter for third parties. This is a case that involved 3 to 4 years of investigation and eventually led to a very mild conviction of under 3 years in jail. This is par for the course with numerous other cases, the most perhaps dramatic of which is the one of the Hezbollah financier Qasem Tajuddin, who was investigated by DOJ for perhaps 7 years, finally arrested while in transition through an airport in Morocco, extradited, causing considerable heartburn to Moroccan officials because of the diplomatic fallout that followed, eventually washed up in a US jail, where he only spent 2.5 years and then was inexplicably released a few weeks ago on compassionate ground for COVID, shipped back to Lebanon, where he received a hero's welcome by Hezbollah. So here are two cases where an enormous amount of resources by the public sector go invested in year-long investigations that managed to catch one of hundreds, if not thousands, of culprits, hand out fairly mild sentences, and then we release the poison back into the atmosphere. Another example which suggests that more coordination is required. A recent 2018 civil lawsuit by AT&T and some of its subsidiaries selling prepaid phones against a Florida-based Lebanese businessman who was buying as a private customer prepaid mobile phones up and down the Florida peninsula. He was then stripping them of proprietary software, repackaging them, and exporting them as unlocked new phones at a multiple value of the price he paid. So that was a case of a fraud which was exposed not by law enforcement, by private investigators hired by the corporate company harmed in this specific scheme. Why am I mentioning these two cases, Kassir and the Florida businessman? Because both of them share the same lawyer who is also defending a number of other co-defendants in a Hezbollah money laundering drug trafficking case in Miami. Here we have an example where we can intuit that money launderers, people involved in TBML, especially linked to specific organizations, tend to rely on the same providers of services, facilitators, and enablers. They share accountants, they share lawyers, they share notaries, they share all sorts of, they share freight forwarders, they share all sorts of players in the distribution chain that are complicit to a varying degree in their illicit activities. And so oftentimes, better communication and the lowering of firewalls between the private sector and the public law enforcement and intelligence communities enable better intelligence for the government agencies to actually act upon these cases, investigate and prosecute. Especially the corporate world today, but also smaller companies, smaller business companies tend to have more and more access to their own gathered intelligence in order to defend their interests, protect their trademarks, and ensure that the playing field is fair. Greater leverage of these sources by government would go a long way to mitigate the impact of these illicit schemes. So these are the things that I wanted to share with you by way of example, and I look forward to any questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Really appreciate the depth of your knowledge and availability to be so supportive of our efforts globally. You've been a great friend and a great ally. I would like now to introduce Analinda Solano. She's a lawyer from Colombia with academic and professional experience in criminal law, criminal policy, and criminal investigations. She has been the director of the Prosecutor General's Office, which specialized in judicial policy on economic and financial crimes, and the director of specialized judicial policy on human rights, organized crime, asset forfeiture, and special jurisdictions. So Analinda, thank you. You're a great friend of Leo Campos, and my dear friend from Panama, the head of Crime Stoppers. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very, very honored to be here and sharing with you this tremendous and so full of knowledge, information, and regarding this important topic. So thank you so much for having me here. Being last is very challenging. Sadly, TVML have so many things to talk about, so I think I'll be just fine. So TVML is not news. In Latin America, drug cartels, terrorist finance organizations, and corrupt regimes have used it for years long to launder their proceeds of crime. TVML have growth accompanied by abnormal trade behavior since at least 2000s, but it has taken so long to be in this point. Surely it's due to its complexity, but as was said before, we have focused on both cash, financial institutions' role, but it's a balloon effect as it happens with all other different criminal activities. So they move to other options, and TVML is a fantastic way to do it. So as you